wire this thing?
Of course I can. I'm an electrician. Only problem is... it takes too fucking long.
Everybody knows this movie scene, right? And Yugo, who was also marketed as the Zastava Koral. To fully understand the Yugo, we need a brief history lesson on the country that birthed it. The Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, home to the Zastava Automobile Company that built the Yugo, was a communist country established after World War II that was made up of 6 constituent republics with unique ethnic and cultural backgrounds: Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Slovenia. One force kept the country largely united for most of its history: Josip Tito Broz, the charismatic leader of Yugoslavia from its inception in 1945 until his death in 1980 at age 87. He maintained strong autocratic control over the country throughout his 35 years at the helm. The New York Times said he governed like a monarch in his obituary. He led with a combination of statesmanship, strongman rule, and a governmental policy of brotherhood and unity, that placed communist ideals of decentralization and camaraderie above ethnic or cultural divisions, and Yugoslavia enjoyed relative peace and massive improvements in the standard of living under his leadership. The Yugo was Yugoslavia's attempt at nation-building in the form of a humble hatchback. In 1978, 2 years before Tito's death, the Zastava Automobile Company presented the leader with a concept car based on the built-under-license Fiat 128. This new proletarian hatchback was meant to be the pride of the Yugoslavian auto industry. Low cost of ownership and practicality were key, and Zastava hoped these characteristics would allow the new 3-door to flourish not just domestically, but all throughout Eastern Europe. Because it was meant to be the crown jewel of its homeland, all 6 member republics of Yugoslavia contributed to Yugo production as a means of encouraging national unity. Electrical components came from Slovenia, interior bits arrived from Croatia, Bosnian factories would build engine parts, Macedonia supplied trim and mirrors, and a Serbian plant would put it all together. The new hatchback would be a physical manifestation of Tito's brotherhood and unity. Unfortunately, that vision never came to fruition. Tito died on May 4, 1980, and Yugoslavia shortly proved unable to continue without him. The country, already beginning to struggle economically while Tito was alive, rapidly fell into severe recession after his death. By 1982, Yugoslavia's inflation rate was 40%. By the late 80s, 60% of the country's population under 25 was unemployed. In the economic chaos and leadership vacuum left by Tito's death, ethnic nationalism rapidly took root, and in 1992, Yugoslavia collapsed into a decade-long civil war. The first Yugo rolled off the production line just a few months after Tito's death, in November of 1980. With the country already showing signs of trouble, the humble hatchback was born under a bad sign, never able to live up to the ideals of brotherhood and unity that inspired its creation. Despite Tito's death and the unstable economic situation that followed, the Yugo actually enjoyed modest homeland success in its first decade of production. The humble car was only brought to American shores in 1986, when automotive entrepreneur and industry maniac Malcolm Bricklin, of the eponymous Bricklin SV1, searching for his next business opportunity, met with Zastava Automobile to bring the Yugo stateside. The business case was simple: this would be the cheapest new car money could buy. Even after modifying the Yugo to meet American safety and emission standards, it still nabbed that title by a broad margin. In 1986, the average new compact car cost right around $11,000. The base model Yugo GV landed in showrooms that year with an MSRP of $3,990, that translates to right around $11,000 in 2022 dollars. For that low price, the Yugo promised relatively efficient operation from its transverse 1.1-liter carbureted inline-4 that spit out 55 horsepower and achieved 26 mpg combined. That was, admittedly, all it promised at that price, but it was enough to sell over 140,000 cars in 7 years of U.S. sales. Buyers seemed to enjoy the car for what it was, with one popular mechanic survey recording generally favorable responses about the ownership experience, though dealers were apparently atrocious and price gouging was rampant, with some customers reporting that the owner's manual was sold to them as a $75 option. For one, the Yugo's stateside run came to a bleak and ignominious end in 1992, when the United Nations sanctioned the former Yugoslavian member states in response to the atrocities of the Bosnian War. Exports of goods, including Zastava automobiles Yugo, were halted. The U.S. DOP. This would be a problem for any car, but the Yugo GV was especially susceptible to parts shortages. Its Fiat-sourced engine was an interference design, with a timing belt that had to be changed every 40,000 miles. With the dealer network gone and spare parts non-existent, most Yugos in the U.S. succumbed to neglect. As it became impractical to maintain and repair the $3,990 cars, their reputation for reliability tanked. By contrast, in the car's homeland, where parts and knowledge remained abundant, the Yugo maintained an image of steadfast reliability. Production continued until 2008, despite NATO destroying the Zastava automobile factories with a bombing campaign in 1999. In the end, Zastava built almost 750,000 three-door hatchbacks over the Yugo's 28 years of production. What ultimately made the Yugo a punchline in America is that is so communist-made. As perestroika gave way to the ultimate collapse of the Soviet bloc, Americans believed themselves to be at the end of history, with society reaching its final form as Western liberal democracy overtook the globe. Although Yugoslavia famously chose not to align itself with the USSR after Tito's personal rift with Josip Stalin in 1948 and the country maintained friendly ties with Western leaders, to the average Western automotive writer, Yugoslavia's collapse was just another example of the inevitable failure of communist ideology. The victors of the West believed the capitalist democracies of the world would benevolently rule until the sun's light burned out, and Yugoslavia, and the Yugo itself, were definitionally doomed. Never mind that the 80s were littered with horribly unreliable boondoggles of engineering that humiliated auto industry giants, the Yugo simply had to have failed, because the ideology that created it was so fatally flawed. As it was built, the Yugo would never have won awards for anything beyond, perhaps, cheapest car.